does.
I know you want it to be bipartisan, but
Should be.
I don't know how possible that is. The only Republican I've heard talk about this in a positive way is Lisa Murkowski of Alaska.
You know what I can't understand, Jake, and I'm sorry to interrupt you on that, but I cannot understand how did they pass 98-0 in 2006, and now it's not possible for that to happen?
I don't know, but is there any circumstance under which you could imagine allowing a carve-out for the, I know you oppose getting rid of the filibuster, but there's some people in the more moderate camp, like Angus King of Maine, who's an independent, who said that he's possibly willing to step back from the filibuster, his opposition to getting rid of the filibuster, just for voting rights, because he's so concerned and it's become so partisan. Can you imagine ever doing that?
Jake, I can't imagine a carve-out, because I was here in 2013 when it was called a carve-out. We're just going to do the cabinet for the president, and then it went into we're going to do the judges who are lifetime appointments for circuit and district. They were even going to do Supreme Court, but they didn't at that time. The Democrats were in control. 2017, Mitch McConnell's in control, comes right back in, and guess what? That carve-out worked to really carve us up pretty bad.
Yeah.
Then you got the Supreme Court. Okay? So there's no stopping it. And if we don't put this place back in order, you get rid of the filibuster, which makes us work together. And I've said this, the brilliancy of our founding fathers was this. Why in the world did they give 2 senators to Rhode Island and Delaware at the time they were forming this great nation of ours, when they told New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio, hey, you only get 2 too? It was basically to make us work together so that the big states wouldn't overrun the little states. It's a minority participation.
It's about time Manchin was asked point blank about whether he'd support a carve-out for voting rights, given the fact that no Republicans are actually buying into his compromise pipe dream. Now, first off in this interview, Manchin asks how the Senate was able to pass the Voting Rights Act 98-0 in 2006, and now they can't get enough Republicans on board. Oh, I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that Republicans have realized that the only way they can win in elections moving forward is to make it more difficult for those who won't cast ballots for them to vote at all. Maybe it's because they realize that their agenda is woefully unpopular with Americans who shockingly don't support coddling fossil fuel companies and eliminating women's reproductive rights and ignoring climate change and protecting tax cuts for billionaires and corporations. And because Republicans refuse to change their platform, they have to change the rules of the game. Maybe it's because the GOP isn't interested in democracy, they're interested in power. And because the Voting Rights Act gets in the way of that, they're going to do anything they can to kill it. Just, for starters. Now, in terms of a carve-out on the filibuster for voting rights legislation, Manchin effectively says that he's not willing to do a carve-out because in the past, such carve-outs have come back to hurt the Democrats. But look, first of all, any rules change made by Democrats that were ultimately then used by Republicans were going to be used by Republicans anyway. Let's not pretend here that if Mitch McConnell could have broken a rule, that he wouldn't have done it the moment it became convenient for him, whether or not it was prefaced with a rule change by Democrats. We know who Mitch McConnell is, and we'd be kidding ourselves to pretend that he has any shame when it comes to bending our system of government to his will, regardless of past precedent. But more importantly, this is different. This is foundational. Voting rights is not the same as confirming a federal court judge, a circuit court judge, as Joe Manchin said. It is what our entire democratic experiment is based on. If voting rights fall, then nothing that comes after that is valid because those decisions, whatever they may be, aren't being made by any semblance of a representative population. It is ridiculous to equate judge confirmations or cabinet confirmations to our most fundamental right as Americans, and Joe Manchin is kidding himself if he's pretending otherwise. He even goes on to claim that the point of the Senate having 2 senators from each state is to force compromise, which is nice in theory, but show me what Republicans are supportive of compromise when it comes to voting rights. It should work both ways. Why do only the Democrats have to be willing to figure it out, and yet Republicans don't? Republicans can espouse the most egregiously anti-democratic positions humanly possible. They can try to gerrymander Democrats out of their districts. They can try to block early voting because Democrats make use of it. They can limit drop boxes in urban counties where more Democrats live. They can make it so that they're able to overturn the results of an election. And yet, so long as they're united, then it's the Democrats who have to figure out bipartisanship. On what planet does that make sense? And that's the craziest part of all of this. Joe Manchin is giving permission to Republicans to do whatever they want. And as long as they don't have enough defections to overcome the filibuster, then they have carte blanche. They can commit the most depraved acts that they know will rig the rules of the game in their own favor. And according to Manchin, Democrats shouldn't be allowed to do anything about it because the only way forward is if both parties agree. Imagine if one side is saying that the sky is blue, and the other side is saying that the sky is actually made of donuts and fire and it rains aluminum. Manchin's solution would be, hey, we gotta find compromise here. And so even though we know that the sky is not made of fire and donuts and doesn't rain aluminum, well, our hands are tied because what's important is not what's objectively right, but rather coming to consensus with people acting in bad faith. And I know that example is ridiculous, but not half as ridiculous as trying to achieve voting rights compromise with a party whose entire existence right now is predicated on suppressing voting rights. The fact is that his preoccupation with, quote, getting the House back in order is ignoring the fact that if Republicans are able to get away with what they're trying to get away with, the Senate will be fundamentally broken anyway. It'll be composed of elected officials who were elected as the result of rules which tilted the scales in their favor. And the same goes for the House. We'll be looking at a wave of Republicans elected only because their districts were so gerrymandered that it'll be impossible to elect Democrats outside of 1 or 2 districts per state with every Democratic voter packed into it. Districts that are mathematically engineered to ensure that Republicans will win every single time. You cannot get the House back in order when one side of the House thinks that that kind of behavior is acceptable. So look, I get that Joe Manchin wants bipartisanship. It's not an unknoble cause, but he's operating in a vacuum. He's not opening his eyes to what's happening all around him. He needs to recognize that not creating a carve-out for voting rights is effectively allowing Republicans to continue subverting those rights. There is no compromise position here. You're either for the carve-out or you're for suppressing rights, but you can't be for both. And the sooner that Joe Manchin's able to finally acknowledge that, the better off we'll all be in terms of actually protecting our democracy and actually getting the House in order, as Manchin claims to want to do. So before we put on the rose-colored glasses and work together in harmony, Manchin has to be able to acknowledge that those two sides are not the same. If one side's goal is fairness, and the other side's goal is to rig the rules of the system entirely in their favor, then a compromise position still isn't sufficient. And that's if we can even get there, which there is no indication will even happen. Part of being a leader, a United States Senator, is having the courage to be able to acknowledge what's right and what's wrong. Not what's in the middle of sanity and absurdity, but what is right and what is wrong. Joe Manchin is writing his legacy here, and whether he's able to do what's right is going to determine how he's remembered. If you enjoyed that video and you're looking for a deeper dive, check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. It's a no BS look at the top stories of the week, along with interviews with the top names in politics, like Vice President Kamala Harris, Jen Psaki, Elizabeth Warren, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Katie Porter, Pete Buttigieg, and more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Also, if you want to see more videos like this one, click the subscribe link right here on this screen to join the more than 1 million people who've already subscribed to my channel. And finally, to donate to my Don't Be a Mitch fund, where I'm raising money for a whole raft of different voter outreach and voter registration groups in the closest states ahead of midterms in 2022, including Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, and Texas. You can find that link on this screen as well. Thanks for watching.